Welcome to the Edelheit Experience, a compelling conversation about revolutionizing health and well-being, bringing you rich stories and lessons learned from leading corporate executives. Now, we'd like to introduce your host, Jonathan Edelheit.
I want to welcome everyone to the Edelheit Experience. I've got a really great guest with us today, Shane Green, who is author of a best-selling book, Culture Hacker, but he's really the global guru on corporate culture. Shane, thanks for joining us.
Jonathan, cool. Good to see you. Excited that you've got this out of the ground, man. We've talked about this for a while, so well done.
Thank you. It's not easy at our busy schedules to make time for new things.
Yeah, man. So they're very cool.
So Shane, I feel like everyone probably has a different definition of what culture is. Like, what does culture really mean to you?
You know what? I try to keep it simple. It's about the collective hearts and minds of a group of people. It's interesting. When I worked with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, we'd talk every day about the attitudes of our employees. And I never really understood it at the time, being an employee, then a young manager. But, when I became a manager, my general manager sort of said to me on my second day, he says, you know what, the guest is no longer your number one priority. Your employees are. And this took me back. And he says, the most important thing for you to understand is the attitude of your team every day. Because if their attitude's not on, obviously they can't take care of our customers and guests. And so, as I've sort of gone into culture and really started to understand, what makes it tick, it's really come back to this idea. It's the collective attitudes, and collective is the key. So it's, culture is not the attitude of one person. Culture is the collective attitudes, hearts and minds, really, of a group of people. And culture can be in anywhere. It's not just work. You have a culture in your family, your church, your sports teams, your communities, all of these things. If there's a group of people together, there's a culture. So the question is not, do you have culture, which some people do ask me. The question is, what type of culture is it? And so what they're really saying is, well, how are your people feeling about what they do and who they do it for? So for me, the most important thing that business people need to understand is culture is an outcome. I've worked for years, obviously in customer experience, working on the outcome of creating great brands. Now I'm focused on employee experience, and the outcome being how to create great cultures.
So with that, that's great to hear that culture is just the outcome of what you're doing. How does employee experience affect culture?
Well, it just as it sounds, as I sort of said, for years I was doing, the customer experience strategy work, working with some really big brands and helping them map out and create a strategy. So we've started to apply that same methodology to sort of culture. And what we found is that culture is the outcome of the employee's experience at work. Nothing shocking there. But even more specifically, it's actually key moments in the employee's journey at work, whether it's in a day, week, month, year. It's how they feel in the moment. So it's how much emotional intent are they meant to feel safe? They meant to feel respected, recognized, all of those things. And then what we've done is we've tried to understand what are the mechanisms or manager habits that drive a great culture. So drive a great employee experience. So if you put all those things together, the outcome becomes culture. So employee experience is for people to understand the journey. It's the key touch points in the employee journey while they're working for you. And what we find is a lot of companies aren't being very strategic or paying enough attention to the right moments. And if they are paying attention to the right moments, they're not applying the right amount of emotion to it. So they're not getting an emotional outcome. And then they're not understanding that it's mechanism or manager. A lot of effort goes into getting mechanisms right. But what we've learned is there's actually a lot of it comes down to the manager. And one of the big areas I know we'll probably get into later is there's a lack of focus on leadership development and the soft skills that really teaches managers how to take care of people.
So you just said emotional, and I feel like that's probably very key and important. What do you mean by emotional?
As I said, so let's go back to the understanding of brand. What is a brand? It's a person's emotional connection or how they think about a thing. That's what creates a brand. Brand isn't all the marketing. It's not logos. It's not all of that stuff. It's how people feel about it that defines a brand. It's the same for culture. How do your employees think and feel? It's their hearts and minds. So what I find is that, let's give an example. Say a company is a creative advertising, very cool, very hip, very creative. Obviously, it's in their DNA to be creative. Yeah, I know a couple of times working with some different ad agency, I would go to their recruiting. We'd audit their recruiting process, and I go, wow, there's just a lack of creativity in here. The job descriptions were boring. I'm like, wait up, how can you be this cool ad company and your job descriptions are boring? That just totally doesn't mesh. Or their onboarding, the first orientation day, there was nothing cool and creative about it. So what I talk a lot to these companies is that if they've got a brand and a style, they need to build a culture around it. And that means aligning what's happening externally with what you want internally. I truly believe that brand is just the lagging indicator of culture. If you get your culture right, and say for that creative company, and you're hiring people that think outside the box, you're establishing from day one the idea of being creative, taking risks, then guess what? The work and the customer will be taken care of.
So what would you say would be the biggest problem companies are facing with culture right now? And of course, I mean, we just had almost 2 years of a pandemic and disruption. Where are companies' cultures right now, as well as their employee experience?
Yeah, so let's just deal. Elephant in the room. We've gone through a pandemic. Everyone's hearts and minds were crashed. They were beaten up, and I think a lot of people are actually still dealing with that, and maybe not as much as acknowledgement as it should be. So a lot of company cultures. We work with a lot of hospitality groups, as you know. You've got these people coming in. They've been dealing with a lot of hardship, a lot of stuff going on. They come back into work, and it's like, oh, be happy and go take care of the guest. It's like, well, wait up. My heart and mind is still freaking out because I'm trying to work out whether or not I should send my kid to school or get vaccinated, or how grandma's doing. All of these things are coming. So whether we like it or not, the impact of what's happened outside of work, I think, does come into work. So we've got a lot of hearts and minds that are damaged right now, or anxious or stressed, that has to be dealt with. I think more than ever before, what this has done is it's put a huge responsibility over onto organizations to be a lot more cognizant and involved in health and well-being. Probably more than ever before, we've kind of played with it on the periphery, especially with physical. Everyone gets in their steps. If we've got the health insurance, we've kind of done our health and wellness responsibilities. I think companies are realizing that they need to do more to help their people kind of deal with their anxieties and stresses, and that's not an easy thing to do. So I think companies are having to really kind of do a bit of a shift. And what I always say is they don't have to be experts in this, but what they do need is to partner up with really smart groups that are experts. So I think that's a big area. But overall, where we're failing in culture right now is we've kind of taken a step back in many instances because things have been so tough. So not only has it been tough dealing with the COVID, what we realize is there's a lot of companies under stress as well, because again, they haven't had the same levels of business. They are under stress themselves. So obviously when that happens, you have to make cuts. You have to kind of pull back. Unfortunately, the first place that often gets pulled back is the employee experience. We certainly know training goes out the door. We certainly know a lot of the fun, social, interactive elements, the celebrations, they sort of go to the side or they get significantly cut down. I think what companies have to realize is that, when it comes to work, what the pandemic has taught us is that you can work from anywhere. And we proved that people actually work quite well from home, but they've been working in coffee shops and all sorts of random places for a long time. We've just now realized that it have enough data to support it. So what I think is interesting is companies need to realize that people don't come to work to actually need to do work. I could be at home doing work. I could be at my coffee shop. So you have to start to think about, well, why do they come to work? And it's for all the reasons I just said have been taken away. It's about to get development. It's about celebration. It's about collaboration. It's connectivity. So I think what companies need to kind of commit to getting back to is creating that sense of community within the workplace. Because let's face it, I think the biggest loss that a lot of people had through the pandemic was that interpersonal connection. They've got a bit of Zoom fatigue. We got a bit of, I want some real people to be right next to me and have a conversation. So that's where the organizations, I think companies have to go, hey, what does the work experience look like? It's about hearts and minds. So let me think about what are the things that my employees want from me right now and need from me. Again, connectivity, celebration, collaboration, celebrations are such big. And also, as I sort of already mentioned, some help with my health and wellness. So in a nutshell, some things that obviously everyone needs to focus on and get back to, because let's face it, there's some companies that were doing a fantastic job of this before the pandemic and actually still do. So it's about a message to everyone else. It's time to catch up.
With that, we've seen similar things in well-being where companies have cut the budget for their well-being programs or they're not investing more. And you touched on the point that, stress, burnout, anxiety, I think we've all been kind of pushed to the limits in all different areas, personally and professionally. And to me, I understand you might have to look to cut budget somewhere. But for example, in well-being, if you're not focused on people's mental health and they're burnt out, they're not going to be productive. The company isn't going to be profitable. What do we need to do to get them to realize they got to focus on the culture, they got to focus on the employee experience and the well-being, or they're not going to grow or get the productivity that they need from their employees?
Yeah, listen. First of all, everyone has to understand culture is not an HR thing anymore. It's not a program. It's not an initiative. This is where culture's stuck for so often. Oh, the HR will take care of culture. It's not. It's a business thing. It's in everything. Every person in the company has a part to play in culture. Culture is the outcome. It's about hearts and minds. So I think people need to understand that. I have been talking a lot to business people, entrepreneurs, owners, and the thing I come back to is, they get a little glazed when I talk about culture too much. But what I do talk about now a lot is performance. And I often, we did a lot of work with professional sports teams over the years. And so it's easy to kind of jump in and say, hey, owners, managers, executives, you want performance, correct? Oh, absolutely. Want performance all day long. And I go, great. Well, let's talk about how you drive that performance. Because if you want to elevate and improve performance, again, you can't tell someone to perform and expect them to go around and do it. They have to want to perform. So how does that happen? Well, this is where it comes back to hearts and minds. The art of business today is about inspiring and capturing the hearts and minds of your people to want. Can't make them. They have to want to do something. And I think we're seeing this more and more with young people. So to create that want, to create that high level of performance, you've got to invest in your employees in the things that they want and need. And this is where I think we've got enough research coming out. Josh Berson's work on the employee experience report was fantastic. It gave us 6 really core things that he's saying globally employees are looking for. Meaningful work, give some purpose to their work. Again, particularly young people come in, they're looking at values, they're looking at your mission and purpose. So give them a reason for wanting to come to work every day. Strong management. We know management is such a key part of this. So managers, what are the habits and things that you can do to make people want to perform at their best? Positive work environment. Now we're getting into inclusion, making sure that people feel belonging. Again, what can we do to make people want to be a part of it? We have to make sure we don't leave anybody on the sideline. And again, some of the outdated BS kind of approaches to command and control, they just have to go by the wayside, particularly when you consider our new workforce coming in, our Zs, the most diverse workforce ever to come in. And they just have no tolerance for this, for companies that aren't accepting of diversity and really do not care about your background, religion, politics, anything like that just goes to the side. Then we have our health and well-being. So right front and center, I think for what you've been such an advocate for over the years, we know health and well-being is such an important part now for employees. And it's becoming part of not just making them healthier at work. It's about your whole attraction strategy now, recruiting people. They want to know that that's meaningful. So you've already got the whole idea that you better have health and wellness as a part of attracting and talking about why you should come to work from there. Obviously, engagement, getting people to do better at work. Let's just face it, people that are sick can't perform as well as people who are not. So that seems kind of easy. But I really think this whole idea of health and wellness is that it's just an appreciation that it's really simple. So, we only have 24 hours a day and we spend, maybe 8 hours sleeping. At the end of the day, people have to release somehow. Now, the piece that, managers, owners need to understand is they either do it at work, which means their releases, I don't do very little, or if they're that high performing and they're really turning on, generally it happens at home. So again, we're seeing things now where companies are becoming a lot more realistic about not requiring people to be, on their emails 24/7, giving people breaks. So, that health and well-being element is becoming a big part of it. And then the other one, growth and development, it's massive. We actually just finished some research, down under with a really cool research group, looking on behalf of sort of New Zealand, looking at what do New Zealanders, the workforce, want and look for. And we found 52% of employees down here felt that growth and development wasn't a priority for the company. And yet every bit of research out there says, particularly for our young people, they absolutely need to be groomed and developed for the future. So that has to be an investment. And then the final one is trust. Employees want to be able to trust their company. That means there's this transparency and there's this level of communication. So all of these things start to come together, and collaboration, celebration, connectivity, all of that gets bundled up really nicely to say, hey, if you want to perform, then you have to have an investment. Now, the first thing that you say is investment. Gosh, it's going to cost us a lot of money. It doesn't. That's the beauty of this, because what we know is many of the things that you can do to make people feel better about coming to work, making them feel wanted, recognized, appreciated. A lot of it just comes from very simple moments, words, empathy and understanding. And a lot of it is just about making sure that the managers are being set up for success, that they've been guided, they've been coached to recognize and take advantage of certain moments each and every day. So I want to really stress, this is not about spending tons of money, but it is about spending your money wisely. I think partnering with the right groups that are experts in this, so that it maximizes the investment, and then really investing and making it non-negotiable that your managers and mechanisms are able to deliver the right amount of emotional intent in the critical moments.
Now, you mentioned something key there about partnering with the right, companies or partners. I remember talking to someone who was referred to me as a culture consultant maybe about 6 months ago. And I asked him, what is the most innovative thing that you're doing with your companies that you're working with to kind of restart, reimagine corporate culture? And he basically went into this whole story that ended with the company sent out golf shirts to all their employees with the company logo and mandated that they wear them on Zoom meetings as a way to help them identify while they're working remotely that they're with this company. And I could be crazy, but I was like, I just thought that if that's the best you've got, that's terrible. How do companies know? And feel free, Shane, to tell me I'm wrong, and that's a great idea to create that sense of belonging. But
no, let's just say, put it out there, that was crap. That's horrible advice. And again, that's the problem, is that some of these people still think culture is about the perks, and it's about the keg parties, and it's the ping pong tables, and it's the t-shirts. Couldn't be further from the truth. And I think that's the frustrating part, is that I know that every company out there is going to spend money. Again, this is the interesting part. Josh Person said, I think it's a $300 billion business this year. So people are going to spend money. What they're doing is they're spending money on this worst stuff. They're spending money on the wrong stuff. Again, t-shirts with the logo on it, thinking that that's going to create connectivity and collaboration. That's BS. People are smarter than that. I go back, that's an old school way of thinking. It used to be, it used to be that you'd give everyone their golf shirt at Christmas, or, their benefit would be to get, access to a company car. There was things that people kind of said, great, I get that, and I'm part of this team. That meant something. So listen, I get it. It used to, but it's not now. You know what? Benefits. Benefits is a fantastic example of how this has evolved. It used to be you get your 401k and your pension or whatever. That was the number one benefit. Young people today, they're not really interested in that as a benefit. And you know why? Because it happens so far in the future. People are so focused. And again, I think this is part of where the pandemic has taken us. They're focused on, well, what helps me today? What helps me right now? Well, let me tell you what is helping people right now. Flexibility in work, so they can be at home or pick up their kids after school, or be at home to take care of a parent, or having some more flexibility to be able to do things in hours that are not 9 to 5. What else is relevant? Education support, where people can actually get some reimbursement or paid for schooling so they can grow and develop their education. That's real. And so again, I think companies have to really start to think about the emotional element. And I've heard that before with the t-shirts. I've seen it. And there's some companies that, will make people go to after work parties. There used to be a company quite famous that was, into that. It's like, gosh, if you didn't go to the out of work parties on the weekends or at nights, you weren't part of the in culture. And that's just so wrong, because what we're doing is we're extending work life into home life. We just talked to a construction company about this past week. And it was interesting because they used to do the after work kind of get together, beer or barbecue on a Friday. And what they've seen is that over the years, particularly the young people, they're like, well, gosh, I don't know why that's not sticking around. This used to be how we did things. And it was so simple to tell them. And I said, you've got to understand that people want to live a good life. As much as you think that work is the number one thing, it's actually the life after work that matters more to people. So rather than, doing something at dinner late at night where they don't spend time with, family and friends, why not do a breakfast? Why not do a luncheon? You've got to do these celebrations on work time. Give them the chance to be social and connect, because people want that. They just aren't willing to sacrifice their personal life to get there as well. So listen, I think it's fascinating. And this is that idea of emotional intent, is that you've got to be really clear and understand what your employees want. And listen, this is not rocket science. This isn't, mind blowing. But if I had to tell any company or any person out there today what they should be doing right now, it's listening. I think, managers, executives, owners for the longest time have developed their reputation on knowing it all. They're so good at what they do. I think, knowing it all right now is dangerous. I think the pandemic has changed things. I think they've changed our customers, our employees. I just think people have to stop acting like they know what their employees want and do a much better job of asking them what they want. They need to be talking, asking, and listening. And then when they hear the values, what's important to their employees, they then start to build that culture and start to create the employee experience that suits it. Now, this requires you, because again, if I've seen this happen where they'll go and interview all their employees and get all this information back where it says, this is what we want. And one of the interesting pieces that I found is that maybe half the employees aren't actually the employees that they want for their company. So they're actually getting the wrong type of information. So what you want to be able to do is go to those people that really do embody everything about your brand and business and truly embrace not just what's delivered, but how to deliver it, and ask them and go, hey, we want more of you. What is it that you value? And again, it's not just about looking at one generation or those that have been looking there the longest. I think some of the most valuable people that you should be listening to right now are the employees that started in the last 3 months. They're the best people to interview. Whenever I go in and talk and assess an organization, I spend as much time I can with the people that just started, because they're seeing things through fresh eyes and they're seeing the things that maybe are missing or that they do very well. So yeah, be really curious and stop being grandiose and us acting like we do know it all, and stop doing the tired, outdated, symbolic gestures like the t-shirt or the logoed coffee mug and thinking that's culture.
If you have a culture where you have high-performing individuals that are just crushing it and care, and then you have someone on the team that doesn't have that, and let's say they're a complainer, they're negative, and you bring on new people where that person potentially, now new people coming in are seeing that person not going above and beyond, potentially taking shortcuts, being negative. How do you prevent people that you have, because you can't have everyone who's positive. How do you prevent the culture from starting to go the more negative route?
Well, again, I think this is, as the leader, you've got to understand that your responsibility is the collective hearts and minds. Okay, go back to the collective. Your responsibility as a leader is to take care of the hearts and minds of the whole group. You don't, and this is one of the things I find interesting with most managers. If you ask a manager which employees they spend the most time with, what do you think they'll tell you? The people that aren't on board, the people with the crappy attitudes, the people that don't buy in, that isolate themselves. And see, that's the problem. And so managers spend all the time with them, People that quite honestly don't want to be there. They don't give a damn about the business or anything else. It's a job to them. Somehow they got hired. And I often, remember this. I don't think a lot of companies have a culture problem. I think they have a hiring problem. I think they're hiring the wrong people. They're not looking for cultural match, but that can be a different conversation. But again, so you're responsible for the collective. You've got people that are crushing it, high performers. First thing you do is you want to reward the heck out of them. And I sometimes get a little frustrated when companies say, oh, we don't want to reward the same people. We don't want to put people up on a pedestal because we want everyone to feel the same. One of the worst things we've done as a parent, you'll appreciate this, is that we've given 13 place trophies to every kid. So it's like everyone thinks that everyone should be rewarded equally, regardless of performance. That's not the real world. Your best people, you need to reward, you need to invest time in, because you want, as you said, well, not everyone's going to be a rock star. By the way, I believe that, but they will work harder for you if they see that there is an incentive. I often use the analogy, if you take your company, and this is an overgeneralization, I say there's 20% of your employees today that are rock stars that regardless of what you do, they will perform and crush it. So 20%. The question becomes, are you rewarding them? And as I said, I think we could do a better job there. There's also 5% that don't give a damn about you or the business, people that should not be there. And yet there's no accountability for those people, because again, it's a sensitivity of like, oh, we've got to make sure that everyone feels good. I'm all for making them feel good, believe me. But I also am acknowledging that some people shouldn't work for you. Not every person should work in your company. Your company is unique. Your brand is unique. Therefore, it's a certain type of person that will excel in it. So at the end of the day, I often think you're doing people a favor sometimes by having tough conversations and maybe making tough decisions. But you're doing it for their benefit because you want them in a better situation. Life is way too short for someone to be working in a job that they're not happy at, especially with so much choice right now. But on the other side, the most important is that you're doing it for the benefit and the morale of the team. So, always keep that in mind. I've told this story. We may have shared this before, but I think it's worth repeating. We were working with an auto dealership, a huge one. And we came in one day and there was about 22 sales managers in there. We were going in and, inspecting, we had about 3 or 4 days on site, just kind of interviewing and checking things out. I remember walking in and we saw up on the wall, the top salespeople. Auto dealerships love putting their top salespeople up on walls. And I think it was like the same person for the last 2 years was up on that wall. We'll call him John. And I was like, wow, John must be a bit of a rock star. Anyway, you talk to the general manager and I couldn't talk more about John. John was, just the top salesperson. The general manager was just in love with John, quite honestly. Anyway, we after a couple of days, we interviewed with different salespeople. I went back to the general manager and said, hey, I think you got a John problem. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, John is, crushing the sales. He's crushing the hearts and minds of the rest of the sales team. I mean, he's a dick, plain and simple. He does every dirty trick under the book, and people just don't like him, and he does nasty things. And the general manager got really upset at me because he's like, you're crazy. And he pretty much kicked me out. And it's funny, I got a call from him, 4 or 5 months later. Say, hey, you may have been right. They had to fire John because of a verbal altercation harassment that they couldn't ignore anymore. Anyway, what was interesting is down the track, 6 months, a year later, we were sort of doing a little bit of work with them. It's like 6 months later, all the other sales managers were outperforming all their results from the previous year, and the collective team was outperforming as well. And so there's a really important message in there. One, you don't tolerate people that are bringing the morale down in the team, even if they are your best people at delivering what? Performance in the past used to be, give me the results. It was all about numbers. It was all about the results, sales, all of those things. So the what was really front and center. I think companies today have to pay more attention to the how. Not only does your best performers deliver you the numbers, the results and the outcomes, but they do it in the right way. And that's where it's so important for companies to have really clear values and behaviors that define how to act and interact with each other, because it really sets the stage for the right type of people. And I think it's really important that right up front in the recruitment process, that companies are so transparent and clear about the type of people that are successful there. So people deselect, because as I said, not every person should work for your company. Some of them are just better customers, let's face it. So getting the right type of people, I think is just, it's so very important. I'm a Laker fan. We probably talk about the basketball before, but I remember Dr. Jerry Buss, the late Lakers owner, who I just got to spend some time with because I was working at the Ritz-Carlton next door to where he lived. But he had this really cool quote, when it came to basketball players. He says, anyone can recognize talent, but the real art is to recognize character, because at the end of the game, to win a game, character will beat talent. And I thought that was fascinating. And I think we need to remember that, we can find people with a great experience and skills that will deliver us the what. But can we find the people that will deliver us the what with that character? Because that's what will win out, and that's what will create a great culture. So, original question, what do you do with those people? Tough conversations. Be very upfront about, hey, how things are going. And I think transparency in coaching conversations is probably a skill that we're teaching more to managers, supervisors than anything else right now, because people have to, if you're serious about performance, you've got to be serious about coaching conversations. You've got to be serious about putting the team first and making sure that the team feels good about what they're doing and who they're doing it for.
So that's a good segue into, I don't know if you followed the news this past week with that, company Better, which I think is, building Bitcoin, where the CEO mass fired 900 employees on Zoom, but then was apparently anonymously, like on their internal, I think it was their internal messaging board, posting that these companies were stealing and weren't working from the company. I mean, what does that do to like the culture at a company?
Well, again, it's the worst thing is that he's at the top of the company. And I think owners, executives need to understand the people at the top set the stage for culture more than anything else. And again, we can talk a lot of different companies over the years that have been called to task for illegal, unethical practices. It starts at the top. So you look at that person, and here's where, this is where companies just don't get it. Owners like that don't get it. I mean, everybody's talking about that. Everybody's talking about him. He's everywhere on the internet. Do you think a young person today wants to go and work for that company? Work for that person, for that manager, when that's how they act and interact? Talk about, poor emotional connection. Now think about the people that didn't get fired. There's that initial, oh, thank God it wasn't me. Then they're like, wait up, am I next? And so what happens is, because of that approach, because of the things that are being found out, you're never going to feel safe and secure working for that person. And what I'm most optimistic about, and where I think companies, need to be aware, is that it started with our millennials. Our millennials started to say, you know what, I'm not putting up with your outdated business practices, particularly around work and the ineffectualness of us doing work. We were just not very effective at it. So millennials came in and says, all right, I can do it, quicker, stronger, faster, let me go. And then some manager says, no, you know what, you can't do it that way. You've got to take 20 years like I did to do it. And then it's like, I'm out of here. So that happened. So we've kind of updated our business practices, I think, with our millennials. Now our Gen Zs are coming in and saying, yeah, I'm not putting up with your outdated, I call it madmen, from back the 50s and 60s. I'm not putting up with that bullshit. You know what? That's not the type of person that I'm going to invest my time in, because I don't believe that you will care enough about me. And that's important, is that people want to feel that they feel valued, they care for, and that the right situation. I go back to it. People want to live a good life right now. We've put our lives in some ways on hold for a couple of years. And now it's like, gosh, I want to get back to it. And the last thing I'm going to do is waste a minimum of 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, working in something that I don't love, that stresses me out. More importantly, work for someone that I disrespect and disregard with every fiber of my body. So, you know what? When managers like that are so obnoxiously and arrogant that they think they can do anything, watch this space, because again, that company will be challenged and they'll have a hard time finding good talent moving forward.
I completely agree. Or companies even wanting to partner with them. Now, you've touched on, trust, transparency, safety. So one thing I want to mention is, because we talk about corporate culture, is one of our partners, Global Healthcare Accreditation, launched an accreditation for businesses that validates their prioritization to safety, health, well-being. Just that they're a great company, they have policies, they're transparent. How important do you think something like that is in how you communicate and show your employees that everything follows a process and that you're committed to them?
Again, it's part of it. It's part of the story that you want to sell. And I think that's where I go back to in the recruitment process. You cannot just sell people today on, oh, come and work for me. It's a job. I think what you're trying to do is go, what are the benefits for coming to work for me? So an accreditation like that, you can say, hey, one of the benefits of coming to work for us is that we measure, we look, and we take seriously some of the key elements that will build your employee experience. And so right from the bat, that, by the way, that's where I think it's really critical. It's attracting and it's sending internally a message that you care. So let's sort of, do that. So right off the bat, it's a no-brainer in what we're seeing around the world, especially as everyone's sort of jumping ship right now and looking for that place. So, anything that says, hey, you're a great place to work, you care, you're invested in what it is, I think it's important. I think then you go one step further, then it's like, okay, not only do you have these accreditations, but you're actively listening. And again, I think I go back to what I said before. We have to always be listening because culture is always evolving. As new people come in, culture, collective hearts and minds, it's an outcome. As new people come in, they're going to tweak the culture. So you can't just sit back and, when I was with Ritz-Carlton, they had the Malcolm Baldrige Award, which was fascinating. It's this, massive undertaking to win, it's recognized as one of the best service providers in the industry. It was a lot of work goes in, but it was an event and it was one-off. You got it once and you go, gosh, I'm good to go. And you'd certainly get a lot of, pats on the back. A lot of power for a couple of years, but things change, customers change. Getting an accreditation last year doesn't mean that you should get the accreditation this year. So I think it's important that you constantly are refreshing it, and that I'm sure, like your partners do, is that they're constantly refreshing what they believe is key to creating healthy, engaged companies and employees. So I think that's important. It can't be just, hey, I got this in 2020 and it's now 2025. Doesn't mean anything anymore. So you got to stay fresh with that. You got to stay current. So I think that's something where, I might kind of mention is that we got to stop thinking of culture as a project or initiative. Culture is just always ongoing, and therefore the employee experience needs to be front and center. It needs to be a priority. And that's why every manager needs to be involved with it.
Now, I think there's probably a lot of people out there, business owners, who are saying, you know what, I'm not Twitter, I'm not Netflix, I'm not the Ritz-Carlton, I'm not a big company, and therefore I can't do anything with culture. And I know that you are launching a program for small businesses. So the question I have for you is, can small businesses create cultures, and can they improve and go through education and things like that to actually do it, versus feeling I have to be a big company or I have to have a huge budget available to do something in this area?
Yeah. So again, let's just go back. Culture is an outcome. Every company, regardless of size, has a culture. So if you're listening now and you've got a small business, you have a culture. The question is it the right culture? I think the challenge becomes when they hear employee experience, I can't invest a lot of money into all of these things that they're talking about. Here's the good news. So we've mapped over the last, we've been surveying and, companies for 8 years now. We've started to take all of that over this last year. We've spent time kind of going, okay, we believe Daniel Kahneman's work about how humans develop memories and experience is probably a core element of a lot of our work. And so we were trying to understand, and we go, all right, what do we think the key moments are? Those moments that really make a difference in an employee's journey with you. What was fascinating was a lot of those moments actually didn't cost any money. One of the biggest things, this actually came up in an interview yesterday I was doing with a group of employees. They said the number one thing that makes them happy each day is when their manager welcomes them in the morning and asks them how they're doing. Now, I heard that and I kind of smiled because our research says the same thing. And yet it's so simple, so basic, doesn't cost a thing. And yet how many places and how many managers do not do that? So what I think it is, that's why I think it's actually more important. Big companies, they get away with stuff. They can have a couple of bad employees and get away. They can spend lots of money on training and it doesn't get to everyone. The thing about small companies is they can't miss a beat. They can't waste a dollar. So they need to be really precise. And so one of the things that we're doing, and why we're launching the Culture Hacker Small Business Program, is to show them strategically all the things they can do that doesn't cost them any more money. But it's about being aware that, hey, you're already doing a morning meeting. Well, let me show you how to do it right so that you actually get people fired up and inspired. Hey, you already have a manager saying bye at the end of the day when your employees clock out. Let me show you how to do that moment better. Or, hey, let me show you how when you put a job opening up on a recruiting platform or through LinkedIn or something and go, let me show you how to stand out in a crowd. So a lot of the things that we're teaching and guiding is saying, hey, the strategic knowledge of how to do this well is something that I think small businesses really, it's tough for them because they don't have an HR expert. Even though some of the HR people that I have met, I would say are not culture experts either, but they don't have that, and so managers and owners of these small businesses have to really kind of take it on themselves. So it's to create a great employee experience more than anything else. It's about the managers owning, showing appreciation, acknowledgement, making sure that their people understand that they're valued. Because again, this is an old adage, and again, I probably tossed out a lot of the old ways of thinking in our conversation. But one thing hasn't changed is that people don't leave jobs; they do leave managers. Just as why do people stay? Because they work for someone who really does care and invest in them. So, employee experience, hearts and minds. I think some of the best cultures out there are in small businesses because they can stay connected. They can know everybody. They know people's priorities, and they can really actually build a culture that I think you're seeing a lot of people seeking today. One that just is really personal, really family, and that's why I think they can do it maybe better than some of those big companies that we see all the time.
I agree with you. And I think that what's happened over the last 2 years also gives people an opportunity to press the restart button and look at how they could do culture different or just reboot it in the way they want to going forward.
Yeah. I mean, and again, don't think it has to be some massive change. It's interesting. I called it culture hacker. I developed this idea 5 years ago. The idea of hacking. Hacking is, someone hacks your computer. They go in behind the scenes. You don't even realize they're there, but they slowly change some elements to create a different outcome. That's what I think you do with culture. It's not about coming in and being loud and saying, "Oh, we're going to make big changes." It's actually just constantly listening to your people and being willing to adapt different little mechanisms, adding a few habits here, kind of guiding your man and say, "Hey, we're hearing this. Let's be a little bit more conscious of, say, putting down our phones when we're listening to our employees." It's about constantly guiding the mechanisms and managers habits that the employees interact with each and every day. So for me, it's not about this whole big change, but it's about willing to say, hey, where we are today, and that comes down to that question. Culture is the collective hearts and minds. Is the culture today making our company successful? Is the hearts and mind of our people? Do they want to deliver for this brand? Are the right triggers? I gave the creative example earlier. The right triggers in place so that our people are delivering what we need them to deliver. And so you kind of take that level set and go, hey, we're not where we are today. And that's where, we've had our culture hacker assessment out there for a while now, but we're creating a small business one to be able to kind of say, hey, very quickly, get a snapshot of the culture you want versus the culture you have, and be able to identify, hey, what are some of the moments that you quickly can start to impact and sort of shift a little or hack a little to create a better outcome. And some of the simplest things, some of the best, guidance that we've given organizations is not going to waste their money on those t-shirts, but just to guide managers to be better at walking around every day and acknowledging employees or checking in on them. Probably one of the most simplest but best things that helps the employee experience and builds better culture.
I think the best takeaway is just start with something, right? Even if it's one thing and one small step, like saying, hello, how are you doing? You don't need to launch this big thing that these big companies have. And it starts with the little things and empathy and gratefulness. I really want to thank you for joining us, Shane. It's always awesome to hear you speak, and you always bring tremendous passion and energy to it.
Listen, this is cool. I'm excited we're out of the ground. I'm excited that this is going to be a great platform, I think, for hopefully a lot of smart people, passionate people to talk about the things that I know you care about as well. So I appreciate it. It's always good to catch up.
Great. And thanks for joining us does New Zealand count as down under, or that's Australia? I don't want to offend
we're down under as well, but I'm back and forth between New Zealand and the US right now. So it's kind of fun to be able to connect some dots to where I was born, but also do some cool stuff. Our expansion right now is pretty cool. So yeah, we're in the process. I said I'm just about to head back up to the US, so it'd be good to be back up there for a while as well.
Well, great. We'll be happy to have you back, Shane.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Take care.
Cheers.